So we're doing duplicate stitch today, and this tutorial is actually coinciding with a hat called a suffragette hat, which we do. I did a version that's flat and a version in the round, and it's designed to kind of help us think about the sashes that the women wore in the 20s and earlier while fighting for the right to vote in the U.S. So we have, bold colors at the top and the bottom, and then a broad stripe in the middle that's white with black lettering. So you could do this definitely with stranded color work, but then you would have lots and lots of strands behind. I'm going to finish weaving my ends on the side. And instead of with duplicate stitch, you basically are outlining the same stitches on the inside as you do on the out. And so you have this really nice effect without all that bleeding of color through. The other thing that I like about it, I'm wondering if you can actually see this, and maybe not, but it elevates, since obviously you're doing this on top of the other stitches, it makes the motif really stand out. And I particularly love this for lettering, and I use it often on things like this, or on like the names on the top of stockings. This is not a difficult technique. It's actually really, really easy. It's probably easier if you've done some embroidery, but frankly, I've never really done much of that, so I don't know that you really have to. In the pattern, there are multiple sizes. This is the child size hat, and each of the outlines shows you how many stitches are involved for each size. So we're doing the littlest one, and this takes up half the stitches of the hat. So when I do duplicate stitch, I like to kind of create a frame with stitch markers, and instead of framing the entire blue, I go ahead and find the outside stitches for my actual motif, and I put a stitch marker just to the outside of those stitches, so that I can really see where I need to start. So I've done it both for the side and for up and down. So this is just outside of where I'm going to be working. So my very first stitch is right here. And the first thing I'm doing is a 0. Directionality does matter in duplicate stitch. And I'm sure that it's not the same for everybody. I find it significantly easier to go up than to come down. And so I am going to start this 0 right here, and I'm going to go up and over, and I'm going to come back down here and go over and up. So to do duplicate stitch, you're going to come into the bottom of the, see how close I can get this for you to where you can see this, the bottom of the V right there. And you're going to bring your yarn up, and you want to leave yourself enough of a tail to weave in later. There are lots of tails in this. This is the, there's always good and bad with everything. So you can see the outline of that V right there. And what I'm doing is I want to cover this, all of that stitch right there. So I'm going to come through both legs of the V above and pull my yarn through. This does work better. Like, this is a fairly dense fabric for a hat, and it does work better to do that. Once you've come through the 2 legs above, you're going to come exactly down into the same hole that you went into in the first place. And that gives you an outline of that stitch. Then we're going to come back up into the bottom of the stitch right above. As you get good at this, you can kind of do it all in one motion. I'm going to do it kind of the slow way first, just to help orient you. Come in and then come right back in to where you came up. Right, and then right back up. And over. And down. Okay. Once you've started to get the hang of this, we're going to come up here. Trying to figure out if I can do this from this kind of odd angle that I'm holding it at. But you actually can come into the hole and then back up where you want to be, all in one motion. and it's a little less fiddly. There. And then we're going to come in again here. And so to do that, you're going to come exactly where you want it to go, right where you came back out, and then you're going to come up, and you're essentially like if you were weaving, not weaving, but seaming, and you're picking up those bars in between, you're essentially doing that same sort of thing. There, and coming through those two legs, and we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next one. Came up a little far. Okay, there we go. And then we're going to come right up into those legs again. And come down. So if you're doing this on a looser fabric, then, and like this is a bulky hat, right? But vintage is made in lots of different weights, which is one of the things I love about it. And so you could always do the hat in worsted weight and then do your duplicate stitch with a bulky. But if you're on a nice dense fabric, as we are with this hat, using the same weight of yarn works really well. You get very, very little bleed through. Every once in a while, when you see things like a V, these are much more complicated. You could probably figure out how to do like half a stitch. I wasn't really all that worried about it, so I didn't. But on those straight, it's a little bit cleaner. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're going to do just one more, and then we'll zoom over to the side. And this is really kind of all there is to it. It's a fairly simple technique. So 1 and 2. Then when you're coming from side to side, down there, you're just going to make sure that you identify the right stitch. And this, I will say, every once in a while, you're going to rip one out because these two up here should remain white, right? And so you're coming into the second from the top into those legs in order to fill the space here. So it takes a moment to get used to the flow of this. One, and then we'll do one more right next to it. Again, I'm going to come into the third stitch down right there and come into the legs of the second stitch from the top and down. And at this point, I'll cut my yarn, leave myself a little tail. And there are people who, I mean, you could definitely just like squiggle back down and squiggle back down and squiggle back over. I don't like it to be too terribly thick, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut my yarn. Lots of ways to accomplish these things, so you're going to find what's going to work really well for you, and I strongly applaud that. Coming in, grabbing that stitch that's next to, okay, so we're coming, so here, right, we've got 1, 2, 3 of them that are not covered, so we're coming into this fourth, bottom of the fourth stitch, coming up and over, and that's how you just kind of restart it right next to it. So the trick is really to just pay attention to the chart. I don't like to carry my yarn around too significantly much because my whole goal in doing this is to reduce the bleed. And so I'm going to, and then so when you get this and you have like this little white poking out, just sort of squish it over and squish it down. And if need be, you can take that one stitch out and readjust it a little bit, but typically just a little squishing makes it work. And now I'm just going to come back up and meet my final stitch up there. Maybe I'll just take you up to that one because that's one other little slight tricky thing. And then you're going to have it down, and then you won't need me anymore. And you can certainly rewind this if you need to take a look at it, because it's really, again, fairly straightforward and, you know, somewhat fun technique because it's a little bit instant gratification. You know, you can immediately see it happening, which just makes me happy. Although they say that weaving in ends is instant gratification as well. And I have to say that I have never found that to be the case, because that's one of my least favorite things to do on the whole planet. Maybe not the whole planet, but one of my least favorite things to do in knitting. Okay, there we go. So when you come all the way back up to the color that you are hiding, sorry, the color that you're working on, that very last stitch, I'm doing this quickly since my phone just alerted me that the battery is about to die. So I know how bad this last stitch looks, and I'm going to fix it off the screen, but I just want to get all the way up here for you. Okay, when you get to that very last stitch, we're going to come up, and instead of, what's really tempting is to come under the black legs, because they're nice and pokey-uppy and really easy to get to, but you don't want to do that. You still want to come all the way underneath the white stitch that's underneath, because that's what's going to give you the best coverage. So that was my only other tip for you, is don't go under your motif color, go under the actual stitch itself, which is what we're trying to hide. And when you do it nice and slowly, that's what your little O's look like. So it's just a really beautiful technique, and a lot easier than all the bobbins if you're doing this flat or for intarsia. And it's also, I think, a cleaner look than stranding for something like this. So I hope that's helpful to you. Thanks so much.